Hey everybody, this is Mike with On Point Preparedness. I've got a really important video for you all tonight. Honestly, I should have done this a lot sooner, and I'll tell you the tragic reason why. But many of you are coming to the news now that Mexico has sustained a second major earthquake over the Richter scale 7 in a matter of weeks. It has lots of damage and devastation. The numbers are still coming in. And in addition to this, on the heels of that solar eclipse that passed over the U.S., we've had the major hurricanes that have caused damage in Texas and Florida and the Caribbean and Puerto Rico. Just major hurricane after hurricane, and they're still brewing. We also have the major fires on the West Coast. And then on the other side of the world, in Asia, there's massive monsoons causing tons of flooding in India and Nepal and lots of other countries. And people are saying, what is going on? For those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, we are saying these are prophetic warning signs. They are harbingers. I completely agree with that. These are the birth pains. They are definitely increasing in frequency and intensity. Now, why I believe these events to be fully prophetic, I also believe there's a scientific reason for why they are happening. So a couple videos ago, I had mentioned that at the very beginning, or the birth of my YouTube channel, I had interviewed this former NASA scientist. He was a consultant to NASA. I know some of you don't like that because you think anything that comes out of NASA is bad, but I honestly believe this man. He's honest. He was also a former consultant to the White House and the Bush administration on climate. And he went against the grain. While all the politicians were obsessed with global warming, he was preaching global cooling, and he said it was all due to the sun. He was researching solar cycles, and he said that there's a 206-year solar cycle that we are getting into the bottom of, and the sun is going to go into a dormancy phase. And so we're going to have colder temperatures. And in addition to that, the earth is going to be changing, that there's going to be more earthquakes. And he has a scientific rationale for why that is. And so you can see these interviews I had with him 2 years ago, they were some of my most popular uploads with almost 500,000 views between the two. This man is smart. He's on the cutting edge. He was fully going against the grain of his peers and politicians because he had a lot of flack saying that he's, someone that just doesn't really believe in science. He has pseudoscience. But everything that he was mentioning 2 years ago is coming true right now. And I told you I should have done this video a lot sooner, and it's tragic that I did not, because I just got this announcement on last Friday. So him or one of his family members were able to write an email to his followers, and on Friday he had a major stroke. And so you can see here he's lost use of the left side of his body. He can't walk or stand. Having lots of difficulty with speech, eating, vision. And so he's basically saying, realistically, my work in this area may be finished permanently. And so I feel like it's been a real missed opportunity that I was not able to interview him. He did send me his new book, which is called Upheaval. It's a long book, about 300 pages. I just didn't have the time to read it, and I told him, just hold on a week or two more and then I'll be able to get you on the show. And then, he has a stroke. And so I really want to honor John Casey and the uphill battle he had in trying to warn people to prepare for all these things that we're seeing right now, and do this video and showcase this new book, Upheaval, that he has. Because a lot of the things that he talks about in this book are coming true today. And I want to share some of that science with you. So I will put the links to these prior two videos in the YouTube description box if you have not seen them. But let's go ahead and start getting into the meat of what is going on in the world right now. So this is his new book, Upheaval. He's written 3 books. The first book was Cold Sun, the second was Dark Winter, and now Upheaval. This is where he's starting to talk about catastrophic earthquakes that are coming. And let's see, I'll need to see exactly when he wrote this book. It was December 12th, 2016. So he's talking about catastrophic earthquakes are going to be around the United States, a year or more over when these things are happening. So here's just a couple graphs I want to share with you. He has the number of earthquakes. I believe these are Richter scale 4.0 and greater over the last couple of decades. And you can see there is an exponential trend in the number of earthquakes that we've had going into the new millennium. In addition to that, I told you how there is a correlation between the sun going into a dormancy phase and an increase in earthquakes. The theory behind this isn't well understood, but if we look back through history, he's saying that there is an anti-correlation. So whenever you see the sun give off lots of sunspots, or it's on the top peak of its sunspot cycle, you have relatively little earthquakes. But when it goes into its dormancy phases, then you see this anti-correlation. You see the earthquakes increase. And he has a lot of other data to show this, where you see the sunspots, the number of sunspots versus the number of 5.0 or greater earthquakes that have happened in a particular region. Now, the reason I say that the science isn't quite understood, but history proves it, can be best summarized with this graph. So this is a plot of the sunspot cycle over several hundred years. And you can see here, they have charted the bottom of these cycles. And these stars that he has are catastrophic earthquakes that have happened. Some of the ones that you can look up that are historically well known is during the Dalton minimum during 1811. There was a New Madrid earthquake that completely devastated the Midwest USA. And he is saying that we are in the midst of that right now. And he's very, very concerned about a New Madrid earthquake. He's concerned about the San Andreas fault out near California. He's basically saying that any time from now until about 2030, we are going to have a devastating earthquake in the United States, the likes of what we have never seen before, and is always at the bottom of these sunspot cycles. Specifically, the one that happened in 1811, if you look up the year without a summer, it was basically where we were at the bottom of the sunspot cycle. We had already had historic cold temperatures around the globe. And in addition to that, we have major earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. And during this time period, there were some volcanoes that went off, and the ash that was spewed into the atmosphere further dropped the temperatures. And so there was famine, there was catastrophe from the earthquakes itself. Again, just Google a year without a summer and you can see exactly what happened around this time period. But again, any one of these solar dips, it's around a 206-year cycle, he says. It is always accompanied by a major earthquake. Again, he has this plotted several times where they're looking at the solar cycle from a longer period of time. You'll see a lot of scientists talking about an 11-year solar cycle, and there definitely is an 11-year cycle, but scientists fail to look further than that. There's a 206-year cycle. I believe there's a 500 or 600-year cycle. And this is essentially what's attributed to the ice ages. John Casey is saying that man-made climate change is so insignificant that we shouldn't even be focused on it. If you want to think of what changes the Earth's temperature, look at the heat source itself. Look at the sun. It's how many thousands of times bigger than the Earth, and it's our main source of heat. We want to study the cycles. We want to see how much heat it's giving off at any given period of time based on these sunspots. And then we can track these cold eras, and we can also see what that does to our Earth regarding earthquakes and volcanic activity. So again, I mentioned that right now he's tracking this 206-year solar cycle, and it's the very bottom of it is sometime between 2017 and 2031 or 2030. Here's the USGS map of high-risk areas. Obviously, you have California with the San Andreas Fault. That actually goes down through Mexico, and that's where we've seen a lot of the 7.0 Richter earthquakes that are happening down there. This is all one fault line. But in addition, he's talking about the New Madrid area. And I want to show you something interesting about this. There was an article here that just popped up, I think it was yesterday. And check this out. Small earthquake felt in parts of Kentucky and Indiana. There is a 3.8 magnitude earthquake that happened in Albion, Illinois. So let's go ahead and look at this on the map. Here it is right here. You can see it's due east of St. Louis. And let's go ahead and look at this map right there. That is right in that New Madrid fault line. And so we're already seeing nearing 4.0 magnitude earthquakes in this area, not to mention all the activity that's going on out west. And what John Casey is stating is, again, anti-correlation. Right now, we're in this very low sunspot activity. The 206-year cycle is going to be all the way down towards the lowest point between 2017 and 2031. So at any point right around here, could be this year, could not be. This is a fairly large gap. But as he stated throughout history, at every single one of these time periods we've had this solar dip, major catastrophic earthquakes happen somewhere in the world, or really big volcanic activities. So John has been just so stunningly correct about so many things, because first he was saying that we were going into a solar minimum when we were supposed to be going into a solar maximum. Again, scientists were looking at the 11-year solar cycle, and they were saying we should be seeing more sunspots than we are right now, and we don't understand why. And John, 5 years earlier than that, said, well, that's because they're looking at too short of a time frame. They're only looking at 11 years. If you look at 206 years, you can see that we're in a constant dip like this. And here we are. He's saying the start of the next cold climate. The dip started around the year 2000. And so, again, you're just going to see this dip keep going down like this. And all these other scientists are going to be confused as to why the sun is going dormant, but they're just not looking at a large enough range. And so he's been ahead of the curve in terms of the sunspots. Anecdotally, here in Ohio, I think the temperatures have been cooler year after year after year. That remains to be seen if we truly are going into a cold era. He's not saying that it's going to be an ice age, but he's going to say it will be cold enough that it's going to affect crops and harvests, and that there will be famines because of this, just like there were in the 1800s, the early 1800s, when I believe it was the Dalton minimum happened. And then he's right about all these earthquakes that are happening. And he's saying it's all correlated. It's all based on the sun. So what's the main message here? Well, one, these are still prophetic. They're still harbingers. They're still warning signs. I want to be able to give you this resource, his new book, which more or less talks about the science behind why this is happening. He's written 3 books personally I've only read about a third of it to a half of it. This is probably the best of the books that he's written thus far. His first book was a little bit too technical for people to understand. He remediated that in his second book, and he beautifully mastered it in the third. I mean, this is an enjoyable read for me because it is just written in layman's terms. It has a lot of graphics to support it. It has a lot of history to support it. So I don't get any kickbacks for this, but with the stroke that John Casey is having, I'm sure that he's going to have a financial need from this. So if you want to support him, I'll put the Amazon link to purchase his book if you are so inclined. But you really need to start getting prepared, people. Earthquakes, hurricanes, whatever. My channel, I'm one who's stating that we will endure tribulation, but we are spared from God's wrath. I don't want to get into flinging Bible verses back and forth saying we will be raptured before the tribulation versus we won't. My main concern for you all is, let's just say this, hypothetical. I believe that as a Christian, I'm going to endure the tribulation. Jesus said, the servant is not greater than the master. Just as I have gone through tribulation, so shall you. And Christians, ever since Christ, have gone through tribulation. I believe we're going to go through that. If it so happens that we are raptured before it, great. That's not going to be any ill effect on me at all. Now let's look at the contrary. You believe that you're going to be raptured before all this horrible stuff happens. Let's just say you're wrong, okay? And all these terrible things start to happen and you have to live through it, and you're utterly ill-prepared. My concern for you is that it may affect your faith. You may be asking yourself, God, why? Why did you leave me here? Why am I enduring this? I worry that may put you in a very tough place in terms of your faith. So, it's not bad to prepare. All throughout the Bible, we have people preparing. It does not mean you have little faith. I think it's a very prudent thing to do. And not only are we just seeing all the prophetic warning signs happening, but there is science to back this up as well. The two go hand in hand. So I hope that this helped you understand maybe why a lot of these big events are happening, geologically speaking. Again, look for more major earthquakes, especially for those in the U.S. that are near the San Andreas Fault or the New Madrid Fault. Have a plan in place. Also look out for major volcanic activity. That's been heightened over the years. I don't have any graphs to show that, but in some of his prior books, he did have some graphs which showed volcanic activity is on the rise. And just be prepared. Be prepared spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally. I look forward to your comments in the YouTube, and I'll respond to them as best as I can, but this is a great resource, guys. Anywho, this is Mike with On Point Preparedness. God bless.